"You called us a mob with buckets," Thomas Wren said. Behind him, Blackthorne Palace burned against the winter sky. Flames tore through the eastern roof, lighting the snow-covered courtyard in violent orange. Smoke poured from broken windows, while servants screamed from somewhere beyond the locked service wing. The new steam fire engine stood outside the ornamental iron gates. It was too wide to enter. Duke Edmund Blackthorne's evening coat was blackened with soot. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, but he barely seemed to notice. "My wife is still inside." Thomas looked towards the servants' wing. "So are 12 people whose names you never learned." Edmund seized his arm. "Then take command of the brigade." Thomas pulled free. "You dismissed my men, seized our pump, and closed our station. I will restore everything." "You believe authority is an apology spoken during a fire." A section of the palace roof collapsed. Sparks rose into the darkness. Thomas turned towards the workers gathered behind him. "Break through the eastern wall. Bring the hand pump through the kitchen yard. Margaret, take 6 men to the old well." Edmund stepped after him. "I gave you an order." Thomas did not stop. "No, Your Grace. You were given a warning." 9 months earlier, Edmund Blackthorne had stood before the town council and promised to end the age of disorder. For decades, fires across the Blackthorne estate had been fought by whoever arrived first. Blacksmiths brought hammers, builders brought ladders, factory workers dragged water carts. Women and children formed bucket lines from wells and ponds. The village brigades knew every alley, chimney, and roof passage, but they had no common training and little reliable equipment. Some arrived quickly, others did not. Edmund considered that unacceptable. His father had allowed 2 rows of workers' cottages to burn because no estate official had been willing to release the private engine without written authority. 21 people lost their homes. 3 died. Edmund never forgot the sight of the ruins. He would replace charity with a professional system. Blackthorne Metropolitan Fire Company would have paid men, central command, uniforms, scheduled watches, and 2 powerful steam engines imported from Birmingham. "No family will depend upon chance when fire comes," Edmund declared. "Protection will no longer be a favor. It will be an institution." Duchess Eleanor Blackthorne had supported the proposal. She ran the estate's burn infirmary, widows' fund, and emergency housing program. She had seen the consequences of weak equipment and confused leadership. She wanted trained firemen. She wanted proper wages. She wanted reliable alarms. But she did not believe the new system should destroy everything that already worked. Thomas Wren shared that concern. Thomas was 57, broad-shouldered and permanently marked by forge smoke. He had worked as Blackthorne's village blacksmith for more than 30 years and led the local volunteer fire brigade for almost as long. He could not write an elegant report. He could identify a weakening roof by sound. He knew where every public well stood. He knew which factory walls shared hidden roof beams, which alleys were too narrow for carts, and which houses had windows that opened only from inside. He also knew machinery. He repaired hand pumps, reinforced ladders, and redesigned a hose coupling that prevented leaks during winter. Thomas did not oppose Edmund's professional brigade. He asked to be included in its planning. The request was granted reluctantly. Captain Arthur Vale, a former army officer appointed to command the new company, presented the system before the council. "All fire calls will be sent to the central station," Arthur explained. "No unauthorized group will enter an active site. Confusion kills." Thomas studied the map. What happens if the alarm line fails? There will be runners. What happens if the runners are blocked? Arthur paused. Local constables may report directly. What happens before they reach you? The public must wait for the trained brigade. Thomas looked towards Edmund. A fire will not. Several councillors shifted uncomfortably. Edmund said, "The purpose of command is to prevent every untrained man from acting according to his own judgment. The men you call untrained have been entering burning houses since before your captain arrived. They will be invited to apply." Many did. Most failed the written examination. Experienced roofmen, stable hands, and water carriers were rejected because they could not read equipment manuals or complete formal incident forms. Thomas objected. "They know how fire moves." Arthur answered, "They must also understand procedure. Teach them procedure. We cannot construct a professional service around exceptions." Edmund agreed. Standards, he believed, meant applying the same rule to everyone. He did not notice that the same rule did not test every kind of knowledge. The changes spread rapidly. Village pumps were collected and stored at the central depot. Small fire stations closed. 2 ponds were filled to create ornamental gardens and new carriage approaches. Local bells were connected to a central signal line. Every emergency now required authorization from the main station. The new steam engines were impressive. They could produce far more water than any hand pump. They were also massive. Thomas watched one enter the palace grounds during a summer demonstration. Its driver required 3 attempts to turn beneath the new stone arch. The outer iron gate had not yet been installed. "How wide will the new gate be?" Thomas asked. An architect gave him the measurement. Thomas walked to the engine and measured its wheelbase. "It will not pass." The architect smiled patiently. "The drawings have been approved. The engine does not care." Edmund heard the exchange. "You have objected to the pumps, the examinations, the alarm system, and now the gates." "I object. When the parts do not work together." The gate was designed by one of London's finest firms, and measured by a man who did not bring the engine. Edmund's jaw tightened. Thomas continued, before caution could stop him. "You have built a brigade that can cross a wide boulevard. Blackthorne is not made only of wide boulevards." Eleanor requested a complete emergency drill. She wanted the steam engine brought through the palace gate, around the eastern service court, and within hose distance of the servants' wing. Edmund refused. "The grounds are still under construction. That is why we should test them now. The main entrance will be sufficient." "For a fire in the main entrance?" He looked up from the construction papers. "You and Thomas have decided every improvement must first prove itself against the most unlikely failure. A locked gate is not unlikely. It is already locked. The porter will open it, and if he cannot, the captain will make the necessary decision." "How quickly?" Edmund leaned back. "You believe preparation means expecting every system to fail?" "No. It means knowing what remains when it does." He considered that pessimism. Eleanor considered it responsibility. Neither persuaded the other. The public conflict came during the official unveiling of the Metropolitan Fire Company. The central square was filled with reporters, factory owners, and municipal officers. The new firemen marched in dark uniforms. Brass fittings shone on the steam engines. Children applauded as the pumps sent powerful streams of water across the square. Edmund stood on a raised platform. "For too long, Blackthorne has entrusted life and property to accident," he said. "That age ends today." Thomas and several former volunteers stood near the rear. A reporter recognized him. "Mr. Wren, will the village brigade now disband?" Thomas answered honestly. "We were told to surrender our pump. Do you believe the new company is superior? It has better machinery." "That was not my question." Thomas glanced towards the palace architect standing nearby. "The finest engine in England is no use if it cannot reach the fire." The reporter followed his gaze. "Are there access concerns?" "There are gates too narrow, wells being filled, and districts where the hose pressure has not been tested." The exchange reached Edmund. He descended from the platform. "You have been given every opportunity to submit concerns through proper channels. I submitted them, and they were reviewed, not corrected." The crowd grew silent. Edmund felt every eye upon him. Thomas pointed towards the steam engine. "Take it through your palace gate before you call the system complete." Edmund's embarrassment hardened into contempt. Blackthorne will no longer entrust human lives to men whose only qualification is owning a bucket. Several officials laughed. Thomas's face did not change. "A polished engine is no use when your gate is too narrow to admit it." The laughter stopped. Edmund dismissed the volunteer brigade before the afternoon ended. Thomas lost more than his command. The forge, cottage, and equipment shed belonged to the estate. He was given 6 weeks to leave. The village pump was seized. Ladders, hoses, and leather buckets were locked inside the old depot. Men who refused to abandon Thomas were removed from Blackthorne employment. One had worked in the palace stables for 19 years. Another maintained factory boilers. A third had saved 2 children from a mill fire. Edmund described their refusal as organized insubordination. Eleanor confronted him in the western gallery. "You have removed every local reserve. I have removed interference. You have taken homes from men because they disagreed about safety. They refused the authority of the estate. They refused to pretend your plan had no weaknesses." Edmund turned from the window. "You defend him because rough hands and poverty make defiance appear honest. No. I defend him because fire does not stop to ask whether the man carrying water can read. An estate cannot function if every laborer publicly rejects its duke. Then your authority depends upon silence, not competence." The words struck more deeply than Eleanor intended. Edmund ended the conversation. The eviction orders remained. Thomas's daughter, Margaret, found an abandoned warehouse beyond the southern boundary. Eleanor quietly paid the first 6 months' rent. Margaret recovered discarded hoses, damaged ladders, and an old pump that had been declared obsolete. Former volunteers repaired them at night. They did not call themselves a brigade. Officially, they were a civil emergency association. They mapped wells still in use, factory water tanks, alley widths, unlocked yard gates, houses containing bedbound residents, buildings where workers slept above furnaces, farms owning water carts. Margaret understood organization better than her father did. She created duty lists and simple symbols that men who struggled with reading could recognize immediately. Thomas taught them to act without waiting for perfect instructions. Eleanor knew the group existed. Edmund did not. For several months, the new company appeared successful. It contained a warehouse fire before the flames reached nearby homes. It extinguished a stable blaze using the steam engine in less than 20 minutes. It prevented panic during a factory evacuation. Newspapers praised Edmund's discipline. Insurance rates fell in the central district. At dinner, he placed one report before Eleanor. "Deaths are down, response time is down, property loss is down. Those are good results. You sound disappointed." "I'm relieved." "You still believe Thomas was right?" I believe the system has succeeded where the roads were wide and water was near. Edmund pushed back his chair. You always reserve a disaster in which I may still be wrong. No, you keep removing the safeguards that would make such a disaster smaller. The winter gala was intended to settle the matter permanently. Representatives of the Crown, insurance firms, and city governments would attend. Edmund would present Blackthorne as a model of modern safety. The palace had recently been fitted with gas lighting. Rich velvet curtains hung through the staterooms. Temporary decorations filled the eastern storage wing. Servants worked along narrow passages behind the public chambers. Thomas heard about the event from a former palace footman. He inspected the outer grounds from the public road. The iron gate had been installed. It was even narrower than expected. He wrote one final warning. The steam engine cannot pass the main gate. The nearest pond has been filled. The eastern service doors are locked during formal events. Test all access routes before the gala. Margaret added a note about the gas smell reported by kitchen servants. Eleanor delivered the letter herself. Edmund read the first page. You continue to carry his objections into this house. I carry a safety report. He is no longer connected to palace operations. Fire is not required to respect employment status. The gas lines were inspected. By whom? The contractor. The same contractor who installed them. Edmund folded the letter. The gala proceeds. On the evening of the event, Blackthorne Palace glittered beneath snow. Carriages arrived beneath gas lamps. Guests entered through halls warmed by fireplaces and crowded with winter flowers. Edmund welcomed the royal representative beneath a ceiling painted with scenes of military triumph. Eleanor moved through the rooms greeting guests, but her attention remained on the walls. One gas lamp near the east corridor flickered repeatedly. She summoned the steward. Extinguish that line and inspect it. We cannot darken the passage during His Grace's address. You can, and you will. The steward bowed. Before he reached the control valve, a servant screamed behind the wall. A gas pipe had cracked inside the service corridor. The flame traveled through dry wooden paneling and reached the decoration store. Canvas, oil paint, and folded drapery ignited within seconds. A maid pulled the alarm cord. The signal wire had already burned through. No bell rang at the central station. Smoke entered the ballroom only after the fire had crossed 2 interior walls. By then, the eastern servants' wing was trapped. Eleanor ordered the musicians to stop, open every exterior door, move the guests to the western lawn. Edmund reached her. What has happened? Fire in the service wing. The brigade has been called. No alarm sounded. He ordered a footman to run to the station. Guests began moving, first with confusion, then panic. A ceiling panel fell in the adjoining gallery. Eleanor saw 3 maids behind a locked service door. She took the steward's keys and ran towards them. Edmund caught her arm. You are leaving. They are trapped. The firemen will reach them. They do not know that corridor. She pulled free and disappeared into the smoke. Edmund believed she would return through the kitchen court. She did not. The Metropolitan engine arrived 12 minutes later. It stopped outside the gate. The driver tried to enter. The metal housing struck the stone pier. Captain Arthur dismounted. We need the side entrance. It is locked, the porter said. Break it. The hinges open inward. The engine could not turn into position. The nearest pond was now an ornamental lawn beneath several inches of frozen soil. The main water pipe produced barely enough pressure to fill a single hose. Arthur requested the old hand pump. It was locked in a depot across town. No one present carried the key. Edmund stood in the courtyard watching fire spread across his own roof, while the most powerful engine in the county remained outside the gates. "Get inside," he ordered. Arthur looked at the smoke-filled service entrance. "We do not have a plan of those passages. My wife is in there, so are your servants. Then move. We need water and access." For the first time, Edmund understood that command could not create either. Lanterns appeared beyond the kitchen wall. Thomas, Margaret, and the dismissed volunteers arrived with farm water carts, builders' ladders, and the restored hand pump. They did not approach the main gate. They entered through a narrow delivery lane behind the bakehouse. Margaret opened a map across a barrel. "The old well is here. The eastern corridor bends behind the linen room. 6 servants are listed in that wing." Thomas pointed to the wall. "We do not use the corridor. We break through beside the cold store." Edmund crossed the yard towards him. "Take command of the brigade." Thomas continued fastening the pump hose. "You dismissed my men, seized our equipment, and forbade us from entering fires. I revoke the order. That does not make the gate wider. I will restore your station. That does not put water in the filled pond. My wife is still inside." Thomas finally looked at him. "So are 12 people whose names you never learned." A burning beam crashed from the eastern roof. Someone inside screamed. Edmund seized Thomas's arm. "Then save them." Thomas pulled free. "You may command your household, your grace. You do not command a fire you refuse to understand." He turned towards the volunteers. "Break the eastern wall. Bring the pump through the kitchen yard." Edmund stepped after him. "I gave you an order." Thomas did not stop. "No, your grace." "You were given a warning." Another section of roof collapsed. Through the smoke came a faint cry from behind the locked service passage. Eleanor was still inside. Thomas faced Edmund. "Follow my orders or stay outside your own palace." Edmund stopped at the broken kitchen wall. Every instinct told him to push forward, to reclaim command, to prove that the palace still belonged to him. Thomas pointed towards a line of farm workers dragging the hand pump into position. "Move those barrels. Keep the passage clear. No one enters unless Margaret sends them." Edmund looked at him. "You expect me to stand here? I expect you to do exactly what keeps others alive." A second scream came from inside. Edmund's face tightened. "What do you need?" "Men on the pump. Water carts from the lower yard. Every palace key brought to Margaret. And no one opens the ballroom doors until we say so." Edmund turned at once. The Duke of Blackthorne began carrying orders from the blacksmith he had evicted. Margaret spread the servants' floor plan across a crate. Smoke had already obscured the eastern corridor. "The main passage is gone," she said. "The linen room connects to the cold store through a narrow wall." Thomas nodded. "We break through there." Captain Arthur Vale arrived from the front courtyard. His uniform was soaked from the weak palace hose. "The western roof is beginning to catch." "Then your engine protects the west wing," Thomas said. "My people enter from the kitchen." Arthur bristled. "I command the Metropolitan Company, and I know the rooms behind that wall." Arthur looked towards Edmund. Once, the Duke would have supported formal authority without hesitation. Now Edmund said, "Follow Thomas's plan." Arthur's expression changed, but only briefly. Then he nodded. 2 professional crews to the western roof. Everyone else supports the hand pump. For the first time since the fire began, the 2 systems worked together, not as rivals, as one brigade. Thomas entered through the opening with Margaret and 4 volunteers. They carried wet cloths, axes, and a short ladder. The heat inside the service wing was immediate. Flames moved above them through the ceiling void. Smoke filled the corridor almost to the floor. Margaret touched the wall. "The linen room is on the other side." Thomas swung the axe. Plaster cracked. Another blow opened a hole. They widened it until a man could crawl through. Beyond the wall, 6 servants huddled beneath wet blankets. Eleanor was with them. She had tied cloth around the mouths of 2 maids and used a serving table to brace the door against the fire. Thomas crawled through. "Your Grace." Eleanor looked up. "Is everyone outside?" "Not yet. There are 2 footmen beyond the stairwell." "The stairwell is gone. They may still be alive." Thomas looked towards Margaret. She understood the question before he spoke. "We take these 6 out first." Eleanor shook her head. "The maids first." "I can walk." A beam cracked above them. Thomas did not argue. He lifted the youngest maid and passed her through the opening. Margaret led the others, one by one. Eleanor remained until every servant had crossed. Only then did Thomas guide her through. Edmund saw her emerge from the smoke. For several seconds he could not move. Her hair was loose, her gown blackened, and one sleeve burned through near the forearm. He crossed the yard. "Eleanor." She looked at him, exhausted but conscious. "2 footmen are still inside. You are injured. So are they." Thomas appeared behind her. "The eastern stair has collapsed. We may reach them from the courtyard roof." Edmund stepped forward. "I am coming." "No," Thomas said. "That is my palace, and you do not know which roof beams have failed. I will not remain outside while others risk themselves." Thomas looked directly at him. "Then serve where you are useful. Keep the water line moving." Edmund's jaw tightened. Every guest and servant in the yard heard the refusal. This time, the Duke did not punish it. He turned towards the pump. "More men here. Clear the carts. No interruptions." Thomas and 2 volunteers climbed the cold store roof. Minutes later, they brought both footmen down through a window. One was unconscious. The other had a broken leg. Both lived. The fire burned until dawn. The eastern servants' wing was destroyed. Part of the state gallery collapsed. The ballroom survived because Arthur's professional crews held the western roof, while Thomas's volunteers stopped the flames from moving through the service corridors. The steam engine eventually entered after workers tore down part of the ornamental gate. By then, the hand pump had been operating for hours. When the last flame was extinguished, the palace grounds were filled with people Edmund had ordered never to appear at a fire. No one celebrated. 3 servants had serious burns. 9 others were injured. Eleanor's arm required treatment. The Crown's representative had escaped unharmed, but he had witnessed everything. So had the reporters. The official inquiry began 6 days later. Edmund requested that the hearings be held publicly. His advisers warned him against it. "The palace has already suffered enough humiliation," one said. Edmund looked towards the burned wing. "The servants suffered injury. The palace suffered damage. I suffered humiliation. Those are not the same thing." The inquiry examined every failure. The gas contractor confirmed that a joint inside the wall had not been sufficiently reinforced. That defect started the fire. It did not explain why the fire became catastrophic. The greater failures belonged to the system Edmund had created. The central alarm wire had no independent backup. The engine could not pass the gate. The side entrance was locked. The old pond had been filled. The palace water pressure was inadequate. The nearest hand pump had been stored behind a locked door. No complete evacuation drill had been held. Experienced local volunteers had been excluded. Service corridors had not been added to the official brigade map. The chairman asked Captain Arthur, "Did the Metropolitan Company follow its procedures?" "Yes." "Did those procedures allow immediate local action?" "No." "Did you advise retaining the village brigades?" "I advised maintaining limited reserves." "Who rejected that recommendation?" Arthur looked towards Edmund. "His Grace." Thomas testified without triumph. He described the gate measurements, the missing water sources, and the locked service doors. "Did you oppose the professional brigade?" the chairman asked. "No." "Did you wish to retain command?" "I wished to retain people who knew the district." "Why did you answer the fire after being dismissed?" Thomas looked towards the row of injured servants. "Because the fire had not dismissed them. A reporter wrote the sentence down." Edmund lowered his eyes. "Margaret presented the emergency maps created after the volunteer brigade was dissolved. They included wells, delivery lanes, bed-bound residents, and buildings with shared roofs. The official metropolitan maps contained none of those details." The chairman asked, "Why were these records not submitted to the estate?" "We attempted to submit them," Margaret said. "They were refused because your association was unauthorized?" "Yes." "Who authorized your work?" "No one." "Then why continue?" "Because houses still burned." Edmund remembered calling the group undisciplined. Yet every rescue at the palace had depended upon their preparation. Eleanor testified last. Her injured arm rested in a sling. "Did you know the Volunteer Association continued to operate?" the chairman asked. "Yes." "Did the Duke?" "No." "Why conceal it?" "Because he had already punished people for refusing silence." Edmund's expression tightened, but he did not object. "Did you believe the palace was unsafe before the gala?" "I believed the system had unresolved risks." "Why did you permit the event to continue?" Eleanor paused. "Because I believed I could reduce the danger without confronting the full decision." The answer surprised the room. She continued, "I ordered individual lamps checked. I kept keys near the service wing. I ensured extra blankets were stored in the kitchens. I tried to manage around a policy I should have challenged publicly." The chairman asked, "Do you accept responsibility for allowing caution to become private instead of forcing it into the record?" "Yes." Edmund looked at her. She did not protect herself by placing every failure upon him, but she did not soften his responsibility either. When Edmund was called, the chairman asked whether anyone had falsified reports. "No." "Was the gate measurement concealed from you?" "No." "Were you unaware that the pond had been filled?" "I approved it." "Did Mr. Wren warn you that the engine could not enter the grounds?" "Yes." "Did the Duchess request a full drill?" "Yes." "Why was it not held?" "Because I did not want a public delay before the gala." "Why was the village brigade dissolved?" "Because Mr. Wren contradicted me publicly." The answer produced silence. Edmund continued before the chairman could ask more. "I called his knowledge disorder because it did not arrive through my office. I treated disagreement as disobedience, and disobedience as proof of incompetence." He looked towards Thomas. "I used his home and livelihood to punish him for being correct." The consequences were immediate. Edmund resigned from the Regional Urban Safety Commission. The insurance consortium cancelled Blackthorne's leadership contract. Rebuilding costs exceeded the palace reserve. Compensation for injured servants, dismissed volunteers and displaced families required Edmund to sell Blackthorne's summer residence and a collection of ceremonial silver. The eastern wing was rebuilt with firebreak walls, outward opening service doors, independent alarm bells, accessible water tanks, unlocked emergency passages, wider rescue gates, clearly marked evacuation routes. Every servant received fire training. No formal event could proceed without a completed drill. Thomas's forge and cottage were restored. Edmund also offered him the title of Chief Fire Commissioner. Thomas refused. You still think respect must become a title before it is real. What do you want instead? A council no duke can dissolve because one man embarrasses him. The new Blackthorne Fire Council included professional officers, volunteers, factory workers, builders, household servants, and medical staff. Edmund held one seat. He did not hold the deciding vote. Margaret became Secretary of Emergency Planning. Captain Arthur remained commander of the professional brigade, but local teams regained authority to act immediately when fire was visible. The written examination was replaced with practical testing and supported training. Men who could not read were taught the necessary symbols and procedures without being treated as useless. Edmund apologized in the central square where he had once mocked Thomas. The new steam engine stood behind him. Beside it stood the repaired hand pump. I believe discipline belonged to uniforms and knowledge belonged to educated men, he said. When the palace burned, the people I dismissed knew the roads, the water, and the doors. I knew only how to give orders. He faced Thomas. You warned me. I answered with contempt. Then he turned towards the former volunteers. I did not merely remove you from service. I used housing and employment to punish disagreement. No apology can make that harmless. He announced compensation, restored service records, and permanent legal protection against retaliatory eviction. The crowd did not cheer immediately. Edmund no longer expected applause to complete an apology. Eleanor returned to the palace after the infirmary released her. She moved her office from the family wing to the new public safety building. Edmund visited her there. You are staying away from the palace. I am working where the reports are made. You could recover more comfortably at home. My arm is healing. That is not what I meant. Eleanor closed the file before her. Edmund said, I nearly lost you. You nearly lost 12 servants whose names you did not know. I know them now. You should have known them before they became casualties. He accepted the rebuke. After a moment, he asked, Can you forgive me? Eleanor looked towards her bandaged arm. You are asking because I survived. I am asking because I understand what I did. Not yet. The words struck him. But she continued, You understand that the palace burned. You have not yet understood why you believe Thomas's homelessness was an acceptable answer to embarrassment. Edmund lowered his gaze. What must I do? Stop treating reform as something proven by one crisis. Build rules that remain when you are proud, angry, or absent. He did. Over the next 3 years, Blackthorne rebuilt its fire service around redundancy rather than appearance. Steam engines remained central. So did hand pumps. Central command remained. So did local authority. Modern alarm lines were installed, but every district retained independent bells. Reservoirs were restored. Water carts were registered. Service corridors were mapped. No gate could be approved without a full engine passing through it. Every warning entered a public record. No worker could lose housing for raising a safety objection. Edmund attended council meetings. He learned to ask questions before issuing conclusions. When a stable worker objected to storing lamp oil beside winter hay, Edmund did not ask for his education. He asked for the barrels to be moved. 3 years after the palace fire, Blackthorne conducted a winter emergency drill. There was no ceremonial platform, no invited press. A bell rang in the Eastern District. Captain Arthur ordered the steam engine forward. Margaret reported that the main lane was blocked. A local team redirected the engine through the market yard without waiting for Edmund's approval. Thomas tested the old well. Factory workers formed a reserve water line. Servants evacuated the palace through the rebuilt service doors. The response reached the target building in less than 5 minutes. After the exercise, Edmund approached Thomas. Was it acceptable? Thomas considered the question. It was useful. From Thomas, that was nearly praise. Eleanor stood beside Edmund before the rebuilt eastern wing. "I once believed authority meant everyone moved when I spoke," he said. "And now? It means making certain the right person can speak before movement becomes panic." Eleanor looked towards the firefighters rolling their hoses. "Better." He smiled faintly. She had not returned to easy praise. He no longer required it. As they walked towards the palace, Edmund stopped beside the widened iron gate. The original ornamental pillars had been removed. The new entrance was less elegant. A steam engine could pass through without slowing. "I once refused to change this because it would ruin the view," he said. Eleanor touched the scar beneath her sleeve. It preserved the view while nearly destroying everything behind it. Edmund offered his hand. She considered it, then placed hers within his. Blackthorne had not been saved because Edmund abandoned professional reform. It was saved because he learned that no system was complete while it silenced the people nearest to danger. The steam engine had power. The volunteers had knowledge. The servants knew the doors. The laborers knew the water. Safety began only when none of them needed a duke's permission to tell the truth. And Edmund's authority became worthy of respect only after he stopped using it to punish those who knew what he did not.